guys, so now we're going to go ahead and get started on math. Today's lesson is about converting customary units of capacity. So today's lesson will be just like the lesson we did on Thursday. We're just using the units of capacity instead of the units of length. So what you need to have out in order to do this is you need to have this anchor chart from Friday, and then you need to have this anchor chart that is in today's packet. Make sure that you tear this out. I don't want this back. It will not help you if it is with me, and it won't do anything for me because I've already got a copy. On the back, it has the conversion rules. Remember, from big to small, you multiply. I'm going to go ahead and write that right here. You don't need to because you have it on the back. But big to small, so that means large units to small units, you multiply. Then small to big, that means from smaller units to big units, you divide. So remember, what that means is if the unit you know is to the right of the unit that you don't know, that means you're going from big to small, so you would multiply. If the unit you do know is on the left and the one you don't know is on the right, that means you're going from small to big, which means you would divide. So remember, if you're going from cups to pints, you know cups, you're trying to find pints. That means you're going from small to big, so you're going to divide. If you know quarts and you're trying to find pints, that means you're going from to small, and you are going to multiply. Don't forget, if you know cups and you're trying to find quarts, yes, you are going small to big, so you are going to divide, but you have to go to pints first. Don't forget that. We'll do some examples. If you know cups and you're trying to get quarts, well, you have to go from cups to pints, then to quarts. If you know gallons and you're trying to get pints, well, you're going to have to go from gallons, and you're going from big to small, so you're going to multiply, which means you will have to go from gallons to quarts to pints. Even if you're going from gallons to cups, you have to stop at quarts and pints on the way, and we will do some examples of that in today's work. So let's look at this conversion chart really quick, because this is going to tell us all the information we need to know for this lesson. We know that 8 fluid ounces are the smallest amount. That means none of these cups, pints, quarts, and gallons can fit into 1 fluid ounce. A fluid ounce is the smallest unit of capacity that we will be talking about today. So 1 cup is the same as 8 fluid ounces. So that means there are in a container that can hold 1 cup, you can fit 8 fluid ounces. 1 pint is the same as 2 cups. That means a container that holds 1 pint can fit 2 cups in it. 1 quart is the same as 2 pints. That means a container that holds 1 quart can also hold 2 pints. 1 gallon is the same as 4 quarts. That means a container that holds a gallon can hold 4 of these quarts. Okay, so remember, 1 cup is the same as 8 fluid ounces. 1 pint is the same as 2 cups. 1 quart is the same as 2 pints. And 1 gallon is the same as 4 quarts. Make sure that you can remember this, because you're not going to have a conversion chart like this on your tests or anything like that. Okay, so go ahead, keep both of these anchor charts out, the customary capacity conversion chart and the customary capacity example chart, because you will need them. Because when you're converting, you need to see which one is on the right, which means that it is larger, and which one is on the left, which means that it is smaller. Okay, so go ahead, get your book out, and open to page 715. Okay, so let's go ahead and start by reading the sentences underneath the title. you can use multiplication to convert units. To change from a larger unit to a smaller unit, multiply. So we already know that. We know big to small, you multiply. And then we know if you're going from small to big, you do the opposite and you divide. We have another customary units of capacity conversion chart, which again tells us that 1 cup is the same as 8 fluid ounces, 2 cups is the same as 1 pint, 2 pints is the same as 1 quart, and 4 quarts is the same as 1 gallon. So you have a conversion chart here. You have one on your anchor chart. I personally feel like this one's a little easier to use, and you can also, you don't have to keep flipping back and forth. And, but there's another conversion chart. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at example 1. Okay guys, so go ahead and put your finger or pencil on example 1, and then read in your head while I read out loud. Marcus has a 2-gallon container of laundry detergent. How many quarts of laundry detergent does he have? How many pints of laundry detergent does he have? So the question, this problem is asking us to figure out 2 gallons equals how many quarts, and 2 gallons equals how many pints. So the first step, we know if we look at our chart, we know that gallons and quarts are right next to each other. So that is the one that we will have to do less steps for. So let's go ahead and do that first. It says, since quarts are smaller than gallons, we multiply. We're going from big to small, so we're multiplying. Gallons are on the right. Quarts are to the left. We know the gallons. We're trying to get the quarts. So we're going from big to small, so we multiply. So to do that, I'm going to erase this really quick because we don't need it right now. We know that we're going from big to small, which means we multiply. So I'm going to go ahead and go underneath, and I'm going to bring my multiplication symbol down. You have some room underneath or above the socks where you can be doing this with me. We know 2 gallons, we're trying to find quarts. We're going from big to small, so we multiply. So I brought down my multiplication symbol. Now, I always start with what I know. I know, just by looking at this problem, that I have 2 gallons. So I'm starting with what I know, which is 2. I already know I'm multiplying because I'm going from big to small. Now I need to figure out what I'm going to multiply by. Well, I have gallons and I have quarts. I can't multiply by the number of gallons in a gallon because that would just look like this. And we know that there can't be 2 quarts in 2 gallons because that would mean that quarts and gallons are the same size. But they're not. So we can't multiply by the number of gallons in a gallon. And the only other option is to multiply by the number of quarts in a gallon, which we know is 4. We know that there are 4 quarts in a gallon. 2 times 4 is 8. So that means that there are 8 quarts in 2 gallons. Now, the second step, now we have to find how many pints of laundry detergent he has. Well, luckily we already know the quarts because we can't go straight from 2 gallons to, we can't go straight from 2 gallons to pints because they are not right next to each other on this chart. We have gallons and we have pints, but in between we have quarts. So we have to go from gallons to quarts to pints. Luckily, because of the first part of this problem, we've already figured out how many quarts there are. So we don't have to do that step again. We already know we have to go from gallons to quarts to pints, and luckily we already know the quarts. So we know that 8 quarts, which is the same as 2 gallons, now we can figure out how many pints are in 8 quarts. So again, we know quarts are bigger than pints because they are to the right on our chart. We have quarts and we have pints. They are right next to each other, so now we can just solve that in one step. So we know we're going from big to small, so we're going to multiply. We start with what we know, which in this case is 8 quarts. We can't multiply by the number of quarts in a quart, otherwise we'll end up with the same number. So we have to multiply by the number of pints in a quart, which we know from our conversion chart is 2. 8 times 2 is 16. So that means that there are 16 pints in 8 quarts. So Marcus has 8 quarts or 16 pints of laundry detergent because 16 pints, 8 quarts, and 2 gallons is all the same amount of laundry detergent. It's just different size containers. Okay, now everybody finger or pencil on example 2 and read in your head while I read out loud. Complete. 4 1/2 quarts equals how many pints? Well, the first step when we have a mixed number is we need to break apart the mixed number into our whole and our fraction. So now we have 4 and we have 1/2. Step 1 is to convert the whole number. So we're trying to see, make sure if I'm writing this on the board, you are also writing this in your math book. 4 quarts equals how many pints? Well, if we look at our chart, we see that quarts are to the right of pints and they are right next to each other. So we can solve that in one step. Quarts are to the right, which means they are bigger. So we're going from big to small, which means we are going to multiply. We always start with what we know, which we know in this case we have 4 quarts. And then we are going to multiply. We can't multiply by the number of quarts in a quart, so we have to multiply by the number of pints in a quart, which if we look at our conversion chart, we can see that there are 2 pints in 1 quart. So we're going to multiply the number of quarts by the number of pints in each quart, which is 4 times 2, and that equals 8. So that means there are 8 pints in 4 quarts. But we're not done yet because it didn't ask us how many pints were in 4 quarts. It asked us how many pints were in 4½ points. So the second step is we have to convert the fraction. Again, we know we're multiplying, so we are figuring out 1/2 of a quart equals how many pints? Now I told you a different way on Thursday, but I think this is going to be easier for all of you because we just did this chapter not that long ago, or this lesson not that long ago. We know quarts are bigger than pints, so we're going from big to small, which means we multiply. We take what we know, which is the 1/2 quart, and we multiply by the number of pints in a quart, which is 2. So now we have 1/2 times 2. We know that when we multiply fractions, we just multiply the whole number by the numerator, and then the denominator stays the same. Well, the whole number times the numerator is 2 times 1, which equals 2. The denominator stays the same. 2/2 is the same as 1. So 1/2 times 2 equals 1. There is 1 pint in 1/2 a quart. Now we take these two parts, the 8 pints in 4 quarts and the 1 pint in 1/2 of a quart, and we add them together. 8 plus 1 equals 9. So 4½ quarts equals 9 pints. Now I'm going to show you another way to do this if this multiplication is confusing for you. However, we did do a lesson on that, so you can go back in your book, find that lesson, and look at how we did that. Or I think there's an IXL, which you've already completed, but you can look at it again. You don't have to finish it. You can just go through it to make sure that you understand what to do. Another thing you can do is we know our whole for this we're saying half of a quart. Well, let's go ahead and draw a whole to represent a quart. So this is 1 quart. We know that there are 2 pints in a quart, so let's break it into 2 pints. Now, if we shaded 1/2 of this whole, we have shaded 1 pint. So that's another way that we can see half of a quart is equal to 1 pint. So those are 2 different ways. You can use models, or you can use your multiplication that we learned in chapter 9, I think it was. Whichever way is easier. If you are confused on that, please reach out to me and I will help you. We will do some examples together and I will explain it again. Okay, so now let's move on to the guided practice. Okay, so now we're going to do the guided practice. Numbers 1 through 3, we are just filling in the equality. Remember, these are called equalities or inequalities. They're all equal, so they would be equalities. Now, right now, do not ignore this next step because I have a feeling some of you have them. Get out a separate sheet of paper. I'm going to say it again. Get out a separate sheet of paper to show your work. You have to show your work for all of these conversions. Otherwise, how do I know that you didn't just Google how many pints are in 10 quarts? You have to show your work. So get out a separate sheet of paper right now. You can use this separate sheet of paper for the guided practice and the independent practice, and it will be a guide for how to show your work on your homework because you'll do that on a separate sheet of paper and turn it in. So make sure that right now you are getting a separate sheet of paper out of your clean paper binder, not one of your notebooks, out of your clean paper binder, because you do not have enough room to show your work in a neat way that you will be able to see what goes with what when you are ready to study this. So I'm going to go to my separate sheet of paper and I'm going to write number 1, and then I'm going to rewrite this equality. 10 quarts equals how many pints? Now, if I look at my chart, I can see that quarts are to the right of pints. So that means we're going from quarts, because that's what we know, to pints. So we're going from big to small. Quarts are big. Pints are small. Big to small. We multiply. Now we start with what we know from this inequality, which we know 10 quarts. And then we're going to multiply. We can't multiply by the number of quarts in a quart, so we have to multiply by the number of pints in a quart. Our conversion chart tells us that there are 2 pints in a quart, so we're going to multiply by 2. 10 times 2 equals 20, so that means 10 quarts is equal to 20 pints. Now we're going to do the same thing for number 2. So let's rewrite. I'm going to draw a line under here so I know that I'm done. And let's rewrite the inequality. 3 1/2 cups equals how many fluid ounces? We have a mixed number, so we need to break it apart into its whole and its fraction part. Now let's solve for the whole first. So 3 cups equals how many fluid ounces? Well, we know from our chart, which doesn't actually tell us this, but we know that we know the cups and we're trying to find fluid ounces, which are not on this chart, but we know they're smaller than cups. So again, we're going from big to small. They are right next to each other, so we only have to do one step. We're going from big to small, which means we will multiply. We'll start with our whole. We'll start with our whole, So 3 cups equals how many fluid ounces? We know we're going from big to small. We start with what we know, which in this case is 3 cups. Then we are going to multiply by the number of, we can't multiply by the number of cups in a cup, so we're going to multiply by the number of fluid ounces in a cup. Our conversion chart tells us that there are 8 fluid ounces in 1 cup. So we're going to multiply by 8. 3 times 8 equals 24. So 3 cups is the same as 24 fluid ounces. Now we're not done yet because we have 3.5. So now we're going to do the same thing we just did with the fraction part. So I'm going to go ahead and erase this whole. You should already have this on your paper. You can just go underneath. I just need more space. So now we're figuring out half of a cup is equal to how many fluid ounces? Well, we know cups are bigger than ounces, so we are going to multiply. We start with what we know, which is 1/2. We multiply, we can't multiply by the number of cups in a cup, so we multiply by the number of fluid ounces in a cup. When we multiply fractions, we multiply the whole number by the numerator of the fraction. 8 times 1 is 8. Our denominator stays the same. We have 8/2. We know to figure this out, we divide our numerator by our denominator. 8 divided by 2, we don't even have to work that out. We know that it is 4. So that means half of a cup is the same as 4 fluid ounces. Now we know 3 cups is the same as 24 ounces. Half of a cup is the same as 4 fluid ounces, so we add those together to get 28 fluid ounces. So 3.5 cups, whoops, I said 3 and wrote 3. 3.5 cups is the same as 28 ounces. Now make sure that you are writing all of this on your separate sheet of paper so that you have this when you're ready to do the independent practice and the homework. Okay, now we're going to do number 3. I need space, so I'm going to go ahead and erase. You should have these on your page. You are not erasing, you are just going underneath, because you can make space, whereas I cannot, because you can just keep going and then use the back and use a separate sheet of paper. I cannot use the back or another whiteboard because this is all I have. So number 3, we're on our separate sheet of paper and we're going to rewrite that equality. 5 quarts equals how many pints? Well, we'll start by figuring out if we're going from big to small or small to big. If we look at our chart, we see that quarts, which is what we know, is to the right of pints, so that means we're going from big to small. They're also right next to each other. So that means we only have to do this in one step. We don't have to stop anywhere in between. So, 5 quarts, we know we're going from big to small, so that means we're going to multiply. We start with what we know from the inequality, which is 5 quarts. We're not going to multiply by the number of quarts in a quart. We're multiplying by the number of pints in a quart, which is 2. 5 times 2 equals 10. So that means 5 quarts is the same as 10 pints. Okay, now for numbers 4 and 5. Let's look at number 4. Let's figure out, we might not need a separate sheet of paper because we might be able to fit it here. We know pints, we're trying to find cups. If we look at our chart, we know the cups, we're trying to find pints. We know the pints, we're trying to find cups. So we're going from big to small, which means we are going to multiply. Now, since I know I'm only going to be using basic facts, I'll just go right here to the side and kind of small. I know I'm going to be multiplying each time. Now I have to set up my equation. I know the number of pints each time. I start with what I know, so I'm going to go ahead and put what I know. If you'll notice, I'm just continuing the chart and I'm just writing the equation that's going to get me the number of cups. Now, I know I'm not going to multiply by the number of pints in a pint. I'm going to multiply by the number of cups in a pint. Our capacity conversion chart tells us that there are 2 cups in 1 pint. So we're going to be multiplying by 2 each time. Now, these are all basic facts, so I don't have to go to my separate sheet of paper for this. Sometimes I may, if they're not basic facts, like number 2 on the guided practice on Thursday. Those were not basic facts. And I had to go from, I knew inches, and I had to go to yards, so I had to stop at feet first. So then I did have to use a separate sheet of paper. These are all basic facts, and they're only one step. I'm using measurements that are right next to each other, or units that are right next to each other, so I don't have to go anywhere first. Now I'm just going to solve. 1 times 2 is 2, so that means there are 2 cups in 1 pint. 2 times 2 is 4, so there are 4, for 2 pints there are 4 cups. 3 times 2 is 6, so in 3 pints I have 6 cups. 4 times 2 is 8, so in 4 pints I have 8 cups. And that's how you would solve that. Now, number 5, we're going to do it the same way. We're just going to use gallons and quarts. So again, if I look at my chart, I see that gallons, which is what I know, is to the right of quarts. They are right next to each other. So that means I'm going from big to small, and I don't have to stop anywhere in between. It's just one step. So because we're going from big to small, I know that means I multiply. I can do this on my paper because it's just one step. I don't have to find cups or pints or anything else in between. Again, I always start with what I know, which in this case is the number of gallons. I know I'm trying to find 2 gallons, 4 gallons, 6 gallons, and 8 gallons. Now, I'm not going to multiply by the number of gallons in a gallon. I'm going to multiply by the number of quarts in a gallon. My conversion chart tells me that there are 4 quarts in 1 gallon. So that means I'm going to multiply by 4 each time. I still have basic facts, so I don't need to solve these on a separate sheet of paper. 2 times 4 is 8, which means that 2 gallons is the same as 8 quarts. 4 times 4 is 16, which means that 4 gallons is the same as 16 quarts. 6 times 4 is 24, so that means that 6 gallons is the same as 24 quarts. 8 times 4 is 32, so that means 8 gallons is the same as 32 quarts. Okay, so that's how you would do these conversion charts. Which I don't think you do today, no, you're not going to have to. Today, you are almost always, that I can see, going to be working with units that are right next to each other on this chart, so you won't have to stop anywhere in between. I might be wrong because I'm just taking a quick look, but it looks like there won't be any time where you're trying to go from gallons to pints, or gallons to cups, or quarts to pints, or quarts to cups, or anything like that. From my quick glance, it looks like you are always going to be working with units that are right next to each other, and then cups and fluid ounces. But let me look really quick to make sure. Ooh, nope. Okay. I just noticed. Okay, we're going to do a couple problems. Sorry, so you will, but we're going to do a couple problems from the independent practice together so that you can see exactly what I mean. Okay, guys, so we're going to do number 15 and number 18 together on our separate sheet of paper. So underneath where you have number 3 from the guided practice, you're going to start with number 15. Now this will also tell you what to do because we are comparing for these. So the first step of number 15 and 18 will be the same for all of them. So number 15, we're trying to see if 10 gallons is greater than, less than, or equal to 1,280 fluid ounces. So every time we are looking at these comparing, we're going to want to take the larger unit and convert it to the smaller unit because it's a lot easier to do the multiplication than it would be to go backwards and do the division for some of these. So we know that gallons are the larger unit because if we look at our chart, well, we don't have fluid ounces, but we imagine that they are right here because they are smaller than cups. We know that gallons are much bigger than fluid ounces. So we are going to start with gallons and we are going to convert them to fluid ounces to see which one is greater than the other. So we're going to go to our separate sheet of paper. We're going to start with 10 gallons and we are going to figure out how many fluid ounces are in 10 gallons. Again, if we look at our chart, we do know that we're going from big to small, so we will be multiplying. We can also see, we imagine fluid ounces are here, that in between fluid ounces and gallons are quarts, pints, and cups. So that means for this problem, we're going to have to go from gallons to quarts to pints to cups, and then finally to fluid ounces. Otherwise, you're going to have to be doing multiplication or division that you may not know how to do yet. So, first, we're going to see step 1. We're going to see how many quarts are in 10 gallons. So, we know we're going from big to small, so we're multiplying. We start with what we know, which is 10, and then we multiply by the number of quarts in a gallon, which is 4. So that means 10 times 4 is 40, so there are 40 quarts in 1 gallon. I'm sorry, in 10 gallons. Now, step 2, let me give myself a little more space. Let's draw a line there so I know you don't have to do that because you have lines on your paper. I'm just doing that so that I don't get messed up and smush them together. Step 2, now we're going to go from 40 quarts and see how many pints we have. So we've finished gallons, now we're going from quarts to pints. Well, we know quarts are bigger than pints, so we're going to multiply. We start with what we know, which is 40, and then we're going to multiply by the number of pints in a quart, which we know from our chart is 2. 40 times 2, we just use basic facts and patterns. 2 times 4 is 8. Move the 0 to the end, so 40 quarts is the same as 80 pints. So now we're done with quarts. Step 3 is to go from 80 pints to cups. Again, pints are bigger than cups, so we're going to multiply. We start with what we know, which is 80. Now we're going to multiply by the number of cups in a pint, which we know from our conversion chart is 2. Again, we're just using basic facts and patterns. 2 times 8 is 16. Move the 0 to the end. 80 pints is the same as 160 cups. So now we're done with pints. And I'm going to erase this, so take a minute to make sure you have it all. Because we still have to do step 4. I just don't have any room down here. So, or I do, but it will be hard for you to see. So now, step 4 is to see, well, we know there are 106, we have 160 cups, so we need to see how many fluid ounces that is. We know cups are bigger than fluid ounces, so we're multiplying. We start with what we know, which is 160, and then we multiply by the number of fluid ounces in a cup, which is 8. Now this is not a basic fact. We cannot use basic facts and patterns here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull out the simple fact, because I know whatever my answer is, it's going to have a 0 at the end. So I'm just going to pull out my simple fact, which is 16 times 8. 8 times 6 is 48. 8 times 1 is 8, plus 4, let me see, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, is 12. So then I move that 0 to the end. So I know that 160 times 8 is 1,280. So in doing all of these steps, I have figured out that 10 gallons is the same as 1,280. So now I'm going to go over here and see, is 10 gallons greater than, less than, or equal to 1,280? Well, in all of that work I just did, I discovered that they are equal. Now I know that seems like a lot of steps, but that's just what we have to do when our units aren't right next to each other on the chart. You won't see many where you have to go through that many steps, but let's look at number 18 and see and we'll do the same thing. We're not going to have quite as many steps, but we will have some extra steps. So that was number 15, which you keep on your paper. I'm just erasing because I need more space. And now let's do number 18. So go underneath number 15. You can draw a line to show that you are separating the numbers. And we're going to rewrite, we're going to figure out, we're not going to rewrite this inequality. We are going to look at which one is bigger, which one is the bigger unit. Oops. Is quarts or pints the bigger unit? Well, if we look at our chart, we see that quarts are to the right of cups, so that means they are bigger. So what we're going to do is we are going to take our 5 quarts and we are going to figure out how many cups are in 5 quarts, and then we'll see if that 5 quarts, the number of cups in 5 quarts is greater than, less than, or equal to 25 cups. We also see in our chart that we have pints between quarts and cups. So that means we have to go from quarts to pints to cups. So first we're seeing 5 quarts. So step 1 is to go from quarts to pints. 5 quarts equals how many pints? Well, we know quarts are bigger than pints, so we're going to multiply. We start with what we know from our inequality, or from our equality, which is 5. Then we multiply by the number of pints in a cup, which is 2. 5 times 2 is 10, so that means 5 quarts is the same as 10 pints. Now we're done with quarts, so step 2 is to see how many cups are in 10 pints. Pints are bigger than cups, so we know we're going to multiply. We start with what we know from our equality, which is 10, and then we're going to multiply by the number of cups in a pint, which is 2. 10 times 2 is 20, so that means there are 20 cups in 10 pints. We're done with pints. We don't have anywhere else to go, so we know 5 quarts is equal to 20 cups. Now we're going to compare this number to this number, because we know 20 quarts is the same as 20 pints. Oh, I'm sorry, 20 cups. Sorry. 5 quarts is the same as 20 cups. 20 cups is less than 25 cups, so that means 5 quarts is less than 25 cups. I think we're going to do one more together, because I think we just need one more chance to practice. Now here you are, number 17, we're not going to do together. You're going to do that on your own, because I want to see that you can go from gallons to cups, which does have pints, quarts and pints in between, on your own. So for number 17, you do have to do those steps, those multiple steps, but I want you to do those on your own. So let's go ahead and do number 10. No, let's do number 19 together. We're going to do number 19 together. So, first, we're going to figure out which unit is larger, fluid ounces or cups. Well, we don't have fluid ounces on our chart, but we know that they're over here, which means that cups are larger. So, on our separate sheet of paper, we're going to start with cups, and we're going to figure out how many fluid ounces are in 2 cups, and then we'll compare this number of fluid ounces to this number of fluid ounces. So we know that cups and fluid ounces cups are bigger, and we know that they're right next to each other on our chart, so we don't have to worry about extra steps. So we start with what we know, which is 2. We're not going to multiply by the number of cups in a cup. We're going to multiply by the number of fluid ounces in a cup, which we know from our conversion chart is 8. 2 times 8 equals 16. So that means 2 cups is the same as 16 fluid ounces. So we'll go over here. We know that 2 cups is the same as 16 fluid ounces. So now we are going to compare. Is 12 fluid ounces greater than, less than, or equal to 2 cups, which is the same as 16 fluid ounces? Well, we know 12 is less than 16, so 12 fluid ounces is less than 2 cups. Okay, if you have any questions about that, please reach out to me this afternoon. That's all we're going to do together. Number 17, you will have to do multiple steps, but I know that you can do it. You're just going to look at your work for number 15, and you're going to do the same thing, the same steps. You're just going to stop before you do that very last step, because you're going from gallons to cups, so you won't have to go from cups to fluid ounces like we did in number 15. If you have any questions, please reach out to me. I hope that you wrote down those steps for number 15, because that will help you solve number 17. You're just using different numbers, and you're stopping before you go to that very last step. Use these anchor charts to help you. Use this one to figure out which ones are bigger and smaller. Use this one for your conversion charts to see what you're multiplying or dividing by. Okay, so let's quickly look at the independent practice and homework and see where you can look to figure out how to do the problems. Numbers 4 and 7 are just like the guided practice, number 4 and 5. Don't forget to show your work. If they are basic facts, you may do them, just do that equation to the side like we did in numbers 4 and 5. Just be neat so that you know which row it goes with. Numbers 8 through 13 are just like numbers 1 through 3 on the guided practice. You do need to do numbers 8 through 13 on a separate sheet of paper. Show your work for numbers 8 through 13 on a separate sheet of paper. Numbers 14 through 19, well, we've done 3 of them. The other 3 you will do the same way on a separate sheet of paper. So again, I'm repeating myself. Numbers 8 through 19 need to be done on a separate sheet of paper. If you do not do that, well, I won't be looking at independent practice, but it's going to make the studying for the test and doing the homework so much harder for you. So if you choose to not do that little bit of extra work right now, it's going to cause a lot more work for you later on. Numbers 20 and 21, you are going to be using your conversion chart to solve those. You do not have to do them on a separate sheet of paper. You're just going to be looking at that conversion chart. Numbers 22 through 25, make sure that you have the answer along with a unit. Those are word problems. Show your work on a separate sheet of paper for numbers 22 through 25. You will be doing conversions. Show your work on the separate sheet of paper. Make sure that your answer has the number and the units. Numbers 26 and 27 are those reasoning and critical thinking questions. So you use what you already knew plus what you learned today to figure out what went wrong or what the correct answer is, and to come up with a new answer for number 27. Turn to the homework. On the homework, numbers 1 through 6 are just like guided practice, numbers 1 through 3. Show your work on a separate sheet of paper. Write yourself a note right now. Numbers 1 through 6, show your work on a separate sheet of paper. Numbers 7 through 10, you have those conversion tables. So, let's see. Numbers 7 through 9, you can show the work on your book. You can just add it to the side like we did from numbers 4 and 5 on the guided practice. Number 10, everybody listen, write yourself a note. Number 10, you need to show your work on a separate sheet of paper. because you'll notice gallons and pints are not right next to each other. So you're going to have to add an extra step to go from gallons to quarts to pints. Numbers 11 through 13 are word problems, so you need to show any work on a separate sheet of paper. Make sure you have the answer and the unit on that line. Number 14, you need to show your work on a separate sheet of paper. So again, everybody listen. Numbers 1 through 6, number 10 through, so numbers 1 through 6 need to be on a separate sheet of paper, and number 10 through 14 need to be on a separate sheet of paper. 7, 8, and 9 you can do on this sheet. So make sure that you do those on a separate sheet of paper. If you have a stapler or a paper clip, clip them together, staple them together. If not, just take the 2 pages, your homework page and your homework page, and dog-ear them together so that they stay together more easily. And then I'll staple them when I get them. Do not forget to turn in the homework with your separate sheet of paper, otherwise you are going to lose quite a few points, because I need to be able to tell that you can show your work to figure these out. Do not turn the independent practice into me. It will not help you at all to study for your test. In fact, if you turn the independent practice into me, you won't have anything to help you study with your test. Do not tear out the independent practice. Do not turn it into me. Keep it. Tear out your anchor charts. Do not send those back to me. You need those. Okay, if you have any questions about today's lesson, then please reach out to me between 1 and 5 this afternoon.